She was late for work, but couldn't ignore a stranger in danger. Her act of compassion cost her her job, but changed her life forever. What seemed like an irreversible mistake turned into an unexpected opportunity. And in the midst of the chaos, she found something she never expected: a new beginning. Before you hear this inspiring story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more surprising stories. Olivia ran hurriedly through the streets of downtown New York City, nervously checking her watch while dodging people on the busy sidewalk. Her heels echoed on the concrete as she tried to maintain her balance, holding her document folder and purse. It was 8:45 in the morning, and she had exactly 15 minutes to reach the office before the important meeting with the Japanese investors. "Please, please, let me get there on time," she muttered to herself, knowing that her boss, Richard Miller, would not tolerate another delay. The previous week, he had made a point of humiliating her in front of the entire team for arriving 5 minutes late. "One more slip-up, Miss Parker, and we'll have a serious conversation," were his exact words. The subway had been delayed that morning, as if the universe were conspiring against her. Olivia had even considered taking a taxi, but the chaotic traffic of the Big Apple would certainly delay her even more. Now, running along Fifth Avenue, she could only hope her legs would carry her in time to the mirrored building where she had worked for 4 years as a financial analyst. That's when something caught her attention. An elegantly dressed man in a navy blue Italian suit was staggering on the sidewalk, leaning against a column. His face was pale, and his hands were clutching his chest tightly. People passed by him as if he were invisible, some even irritably, swerving around him, as if he were an inconvenience in their busy mornings. Olivia stopped. Time seemed to freeze as she observed the man clearly in distress. Her instincts screamed for her to help him, but her rational mind reminded her of the meeting, her job at risk, everything she had achieved with so much effort. For a brief moment, she considered continuing on her way like everyone else. But she couldn't. Something in that frightened look in the man's eyes made her turn back. In a few steps she was by his side. "Sir, are you all right? Do you need help?" The man, who appeared to be about 50 years old, tried to respond, but his words came out broken. Olivia helped him sit on a nearby bench, noticing how his hands trembled and the cold sweat trickling down his forehead. Without hesitation, she took out her cell phone and called emergency services. While waiting for the ambulance, she held the stranger's hand firmly, trying to provide some comfort. "Everything will be okay. Help is on the way," she repeated, more to herself than to him. The minutes felt like hours until help arrived. Olivia watched as the paramedics put him in the ambulance, feeling a tightness in her chest as she saw the man being taken away. Something about him seemed familiar, although she was certain she had never seen him before. When she finally looked at her watch, her heart raced. 9:30. The meeting had started half an hour ago. Running like she had never run before, Olivia arrived at the office at 9:45. The sepulchral silence on the floor and the pitying looks from her colleagues already indicated what was to come. Sandra, her only friend at work, approached with a concerned expression. "Olivia, where were you? Richard is furious. The Japanese cancelled the contract." Richard Miller's thunderous voice completed the sentence. He was standing at the door of his office, his face red with anger. "In my office now." The entire office stopped to watch as Olivia walked toward what she knew would be her professional execution. Inside the office, Richard didn't even wait for her to sit down. 4 years, Olivia. 4 years of investment in this company, training, opportunities, and how do you repay us? By missing the most important meeting of the year. "Mr. Miller, I can explain. There was a man getting sick on the street. He needed help." "Spare me your fantastical excuses," he interrupted her, throwing a folder on the desk. "Do you know how much we lost today? Millions. The Japanese not only cancelled the contract, but made it very clear they will never do business with us again." Olivia felt her blood run cold. All her work, her sleepless nights preparing reports, the sacrificed weekends, everything seemed to crumble before her eyes. "You're fired," Richard declared coldly. "Collect your things and leave by the end of the day. Your system access will be cut off in an hour." She could have begged, could have tried to argue, but something inside her was different. The image of the man on the bench, vulnerable and alone, made her stand firm. She stood up, looked her now ex-boss in the eyes and said with a calmness she didn't know she possessed, "You're right, sir. I failed the company today, but I don't regret helping someone who needed it." She left the office with her head held high, ignoring the whispers and curious glances. At her desk, she began collecting her belongings, the family photos, the small plant she had kept alive for 3 years, the colored pens she used to organize her reports. Sandra approached, offering help and words of consolation, but Olivia barely heard. Her mind was at the hospital, worried about the stranger she had helped. Was he okay? Did he have family? Why had no one else stopped to help him? As she packed her things into a cardboard box, Olivia couldn't imagine that that morning would mark not just the end of her career at the company, but the beginning of a story that would change her life forever. The man she had helped harbored secrets that would completely transform her destiny, and that casual encounter on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue was just the first chapter of a much bigger story. After leaving the office, Olivia found herself standing on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, a cardboard box in her arms and no direction to follow. The afternoon sun beat down on her skin, but she barely felt the heat. Her mind was divided between concern about the bills she would need to pay and curiosity about the health of the man she had helped that morning. Without thinking too much, she took a taxi to Mount Sinai Hospital. At the reception, an employee, with a serious expression, attended to her with mechanical efficiency. "I'm sorry, but without being a family member, I can't provide information about the patient," explained the receptionist, adjusting her heavy-framed glasses. "Please," Olivia insisted, "I just want to know if he's okay. I was the one who called the ambulance this morning on Fifth Avenue." The employee hesitated for a moment, her fingers drumming on the keyboard. "The most I can say is that he's stable, but still unconscious. He's in the ICU." Olivia thanked her and sat in the waiting area, still holding her box of belongings. Why couldn't she simply leave? Something kept her there, an inexplicable feeling that she needed to stay. The hours passed as she observed the coming and going of doctors and nurses, each carrying their own stories and concerns. Late in the afternoon, as the sun was setting through the hospital windows, an elegant woman entered the reception area hurriedly. Her expensive heels echoed on the marble floor as she gestured nervously. "I'm here to see my father, Albert Montgomery. I was informed he had a heart attack this morning." The name caught Olivia's attention. The woman had familiar features, vaguely resembling the man she had helped. She stood up hesitantly and approached. "Excuse me," Olivia said softly. "I was there when your father fell ill. I was the one who called the ambulance." The woman turned abruptly, her green eyes studying Olivia intensely. You stayed with him?" "Yes. I held his hand until the ambulance arrived." To her surprise, the woman hugged her tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not walking on like everyone else." Olivia discovered that the woman's name was Hannah Montgomery. She was a lawyer and Albert's only daughter. As they talked in the hospital cafeteria, Hannah revealed that her father was one of the biggest entrepreneurs in the technology industry in the country, owner of Montgomery Tech, a company that had revolutionized the financial software market in North America. "He's always been a workaholic," Hannah explained, absent-mindedly stirring her coffee. "After Mum left us 5 years ago, he immersed himself even more in work. The doctors had already warned about the stress, but you know how these businessmen are." Olivia listened attentively, beginning to understand why she had felt that inexplicable connection with Albert. Her own father had been like that, dedicated to work until the very end. "You know," Hannah continued, "it's ironic. Today he had an important meeting with Japanese investors. He had been nervous about it for weeks." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. Japanese investors? Would it happen to be with the Takamoto Corporation? Hannah's eyes widened. "Exactly. How do you know?" Olivia felt the world spin. The meeting that had cost her job, the $1 million contract lost, everything connected to the man she had helped. In the days that followed, Olivia continued visiting the hospital. Sometimes she found Hannah, other times she stayed alone talking to Albert even though he was unconscious. She told him about her job search, about the failed interviews, and about how, despite everything, she didn't regret stopping to help him. 1 week turned into 2, and Olivia established a routine. In the morning, she looked for work. In the afternoon, she visited Albert. On one of those afternoons, while arranging flowers in his room, she noticed a small movement in his fingers. "Mr. Montgomery?" she called softly, approaching the bed. His eyes fluttered and slowly opened. His gaze was confused, disoriented, but when it fell on Olivia, something changed. A flash of recognition crossed his face. "You—" His voice came out hoarse. "You're—" "The voice I've been hearing all these days." Olivia froze. You could hear me?" "Every word," he replied with a small smile. "About your job, your worries, your life. You kept me connected to the world when everything was darkness." Tears began to roll down Olivia's face before she could contain them. Albert extended a trembling hand and held hers, the same way she had done that morning on the sidewalk. "Now," he said with surprising strength in his voice, "tell me about that meeting with the Japanese that you missed because of me." Olivia's heart raced. How to explain that the man she had saved was the same one who, indirectly, had caused her dismissal? How to tell him that the lost contract, which had caused so much damage to the company where she worked, was with his own company? But before she could answer, the door to the room opened. Hannah entered, dropping her purse when she saw her father awake. The moment of revelation would have to wait, but Olivia knew that her story with Albert Montgomery was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. In the days following Albert's awakening, Olivia kept away from the hospital. As much as she wanted to visit him, she felt confused about how to explain the whole situation. The coincidences were too surreal. She had lost her job because of a meeting with his company, but at the same time, she had saved his life. In her small apartment in Brooklyn, Olivia spent her mornings sending resumes and her afternoons trying not to think about Albert Montgomery. Her savings were running out, and the rent would be due in 2 weeks. Reality was beginning to weigh on her shoulders. It was on a rainy Wednesday that her doorbell rang. Upon opening the door, she found herself face to face with Hannah, elegant as always, holding a dripping umbrella. "May I come in?" she asked with a gentle smile. "Dad wants to talk to you." Olivia felt her stomach churn. He knows about the meeting." "He knows everything," Hannah replied, sitting on the small living room sofa. "Actually, he figured it out as soon as he woke up. The Takamoto Corporation is our main partner in Asia. It wasn't hard to connect the dots when you mentioned losing your job for missing a meeting with Japanese investors." Silence hung between them for a few moments, broken only by the sound of rain on the window. "Olivia," Hannah continued, "Dad isn't angry. In fact, he's fascinated by the irony of fate, and he wants to make you a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "That's something he wants to discuss personally. He's waiting for you at his office at Montgomery Tech this afternoon." Olivia spent the next few hours in a state of growing nervousness. She carefully chose her most professional outfit, a black pantsuit she used to wear to important meetings, and took a taxi to the imposing Montgomery Tech building in the heart of the financial district. The receptionist was already aware of her arrival and led her directly to the top floor. The elevator doors opened to a stunning view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Albert was standing, looking out at New York City, when she entered his office. "Olivia," he turned with a warm smile. "Finally, I can properly thank the woman who saved my life." She noticed he was still a bit pale, but his eyes shone with surprising intensity. He gestured for her to sit in one of the leather armchairs. "Mr. Montgomery, sir." "Albert, please," he gently interrupted her. "After spending 2 weeks listening to your stories while I was unconscious, I think we can dispense with formalities." Olivia blushed slightly. "Albert, about the meeting." "Ah, yes. The famous meeting with Takamoto," he laughed softly. "You know, it's funny how the universe works. I was about to make a terrible mistake that morning." "What do you mean?" "The contract we were going to sign. There was a clause that would compromise the future of the company. I was so obsessed with closing the deal that I didn't notice the traps in the contract. My incident ended up being a blessing in disguise. We were able to renegotiate the terms under much more favorable conditions. Olivia blinked, confused. So the contract wasn't lost? Not only was it not lost, but it was improved, he smiled. And that's why I want to make you a proposal. Albert stood up, walking to his desk and picking up a folder. In the last few days, I've done some research on you, Olivia Parker. Business administration graduate from NYU, postgraduate in finance, 4 years of experience in financial analysis. Impressive. But do you know what impressed me most? Your integrity. He opened the folder, revealing a contract. I want you to work for me. Not out of gratitude, but because I need people like you on my team. People who stop to help a stranger even when it might cost them their job. People who have the courage to do the right thing. Olivia took the contract with trembling hands. The salary offered was 3 times her previous one. But why? Because during those 2 weeks when you visited a complete stranger, in the hospital, talking to me even without knowing if I could hear you, I learned more about your character than any interview could reveal. He paused. And also because I need someone with your experience to lead our new financial analysis division. Olivia looked at the contract, at Albert, and back at the contract. It was an incredible opportunity, but something bothered her. What if I'm not good enough? What if... Olivia, Albert interrupted her, you already proved you're worth the moment you chose to stop and help a stranger, even knowing you might hurt yourself. The rest we can build together. At that moment, looking out the window at the city she loved so much, Olivia realized that sometimes endings are just new beginnings in disguise. She took the pen Albert offered and, with a smile, signed the contract. What she didn't know was that signature would mark not only the beginning of a new professional phase, but also the start of a story that would change her life in ways she could never imagine. Albert Montgomery held more secrets than she suspected, and fate still had many surprises in store for both of them. The weeks following Olivia's hiring were a real whirlwind. Montgomery Tech was a completely different world from the company, where she had previously worked. The office occupied 5 floors of one of New York City's most modern skyscrapers, with open spaces, high-tech meeting rooms, and even a gourmet cafe on the terrace with a panoramic view of the city. Olivia was introduced as the new Director of Financial Analysis, a position that made her gulp when she saw her name on the door of a spacious office on the 48th floor. The responsibility was immense, but Albert seemed to have unwavering confidence in her. Remember, he said on her first day, you're here not just for what you know, but for who you are. Trust your instincts. Days turned into weeks, and Olivia dove headfirst into her work. Her nights were spent poring over reports, studying the market, and trying to understand every nuance of the empire Albert had built. Montgomery Tech wasn't just a financial software company. It had branches in artificial intelligence, blockchain, and even smart city projects. It was during one of those nights of study that Olivia discovered something intriguing. Analyzing the financial reports of the last 5 years, she noticed a series of transactions to a company called Project Aurora. The amounts were significant, but there were no details about the nature of these transactions. Intrigued, Olivia decided to investigate further. However, each attempt to obtain information about Project Aurora was frustrated. No one in the company seemed to know what it was about, and the few who recognized the name quickly changed the subject. On a Friday night, when almost everyone had already gone home, Olivia decided to talk to Albert about her discoveries. As she approached his office, she heard raised voices. "You can't continue with this, Dad." It was Hannah's voice. "Project Aurora is too dangerous. If they find out..." "We've already discussed this, Hannah." Albert's voice sounded tired. "It's bigger than us. We can't stop now." Olivia froze, her heart racing. What could be so important and yet so dangerous? Before she could move away, the door opened abruptly. Hannah came out, almost bumping into Olivia. Their eyes met for a moment. A mixture of surprise and "Fee, Olivia?" Albert's voice came from inside the office. "Come in, please." With her heart in her throat, she entered. Albert was standing by the window, his tense face illuminated by the city lights. "How much did you hear?" he asked without beating around. "The bush. I'd heard something about Project Aurora," Olivia replied, deciding to be honest. "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I found some transactions in the reports." Albert sighed deeply, running a hand through his grey hair. "I knew this day would come. You're too good at what you do not to notice." He walked to a panel on the wall and pressed something. To Olivia's surprise, a secret door opened, revealing a hidden room. "What you're about to see, Olivia, will change everything you think you know about our company and about me," Albert said, his voice laden with seriousness. "But before we go in, I need you to understand one thing. Once you know the truth, there's no going back. Your life will change forever. Are you prepared for that?" Olivia hesitated for a moment. Her entire life had been built on solid foundations of logic and reason. Whatever was beyond that door seemed to challenge all of that. But curiosity and an inexplicable sense of destiny pushed her forward. "I'm ready," she answered, her voice firmer than she felt. Albert nodded gravely and gestured for her to follow him. As they crossed the secret door, Olivia felt as if she were entering another world. The room was a futuristic laboratory, with holographic screens, equipment she had never seen before, and in the center something that looked like a glowing glass capsule. "Welcome to the heart of Project Aurora," Albert announced. "Olivia, what you're about to discover will not only change your life, but could change the course of human history." As Albert began to explain, Olivia's eyes widened more and more. Project Aurora was much more than she could have imagined, and the implications of what she was seeing were both frightening and fascinating at the same time. At that moment, Olivia understood that her decision to help a stranger that morning on Fifth Avenue had not only saved a life, it had placed her at the center of something much bigger, something that could transform the future of humanity. And so, on a Friday night in the heart of New York City, Olivia Parker took the first step on a journey that would take her to places she never imagined possible, challenging the limits of science, ethics, and her own understanding of the world. Olivia was speechless at Albert's revelation. Project Aurora wasn't just an ordinary research initiative. It was a bold attempt to develop time travel technology. "Time travel?" Olivia whispered, incredulous. "But that's impossible." Albert smiled, a gleam in his eyes that mixed pride and concern. "5 years ago I would have agreed with you, but here we are." He guided her through the room, explaining the sophisticated equipment. In the center, the glass capsule Olivia had noticed before was actually a time machine prototype. "We call it the Aurora capsule," Albert explained. "We haven't yet managed to send a person, but we've conducted successful experiments with inanimate objects and small organisms." Olivia tried to absorb everything, her scientific mind struggling to reconcile what she saw with everything she believed to be possible. "But why?" she finally asked. "Why keep this a secret? This would change everything." Albert's face grew somber. "And that's exactly why it must remain a secret, at least for now. Imagine the chaos if this fell into the wrong hands. Governments, corporations, terrorists, all wanting to shape the past to their advantage." Olivia began to understand the magnitude of what was before her. The ethical, philosophical, and practical implications were staggering. "And where do I fit into this?" she asked, feeling there was more to the story. Albert sighed deeply. "Olivia, I don't just have cancer. I have an inoperable brain tumor. The doctors have given me, at most, a year to live." The shock of the revelation hit Olivia like a punch. "But your recovery at the hospital?" "It was temporary," he completed. "The heart attack was a side effect of the experimental treatment I'm undergoing, but it's just to buy time." Olivia felt tears forming in her eyes. In such a short time, Albert had become more than a boss. He was almost a father figure. "Project Aurora," he continued, "isn't just about time travel. It's about trying to change my fate. If we can go back and prevent the tumor from developing—" "But wouldn't that cause a paradox?" Olivia interrupted, her analytical mind taking control. "If you prevent the tumor, you would never have created Project Aurora in the first place." Albert smiled. "Exactly. That's why we need you. Your sharp mind, your integrity. We need someone who can navigate not only the technical challenges, but also the ethical dilemmas we'll face. Olivia was silent for a moment, processing everything. Part of her wanted to run away, return to the safe and predictable world she knew, but another part, a part she didn't know existed until that moment, yearned for the challenge. "And Hannah?" she asked, remembering the heated discussion she had overheard. "My daughter. She fears the consequences. She thinks we're playing." "God," Albert explained with a tone of sadness, "she doesn't understand that I'm not doing this just for myself. Think of the lives we could save, the tragedies we could prevent." Olivia walked to the Aurora capsule, observing her distorted reflection on the curved surface. The possibilities were endless, as were the dangers. "If I accept," she said slowly, "I want total transparency. No secrets, nothing hidden. And if at any point I feel we're crossing an ethical line, I have the right to stop everything." Albert extended his hand. "Agreed. Welcome officially to Project Aurora, Olivia." When she shook his hand, she felt as if she was sealing not just an agreement, but her destiny. The world she knew had changed forever, and she was at the epicenter of that change. In the days that followed, Olivia immersed herself in the details of the project. Nights spent studying quantum physics, multiverse theories, and temporal paradoxes. Her life outside of work practically ceased to exist. One night, while working late in the laboratory, Hannah appeared. Her face was tense, her eyes red, as if she had been crying. "Olivia," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "we need to talk. There are things about Project Aurora that my father hasn't told you. Things you need to know." The urgency in Hannah's voice made Olivia feel a chill. What else could there be beyond what she already knew? What other secrets did Project Aurora hide? As Hannah prepared to reveal what she knew, Olivia realized she was about to dive even deeper into the rabbit hole. Whatever was coming, she knew there was no turning back. The future, and possibly the past, depended on the choices she would make from that moment on. The laboratory, usually bustling during the day, was silent at that hour of the night. The only lights came from the computer screens and the soft glow of the Aurora capsule. Hannah guided Olivia to a more secluded area, away from the curious eyes of the security cameras. "What do you know about my mother's death?" Hannah asked. Abruptly, her eyes fixed on Olivia. Caught by surprise, Olivia hesitated. "Just what your father told me, that she left us 5 years ago." Hannah let out a bitter laugh. "Left us? What an elegant way to say she died, isn't it?" Olivia felt a knot form in her stomach. There was something in Hannah's voice, a mixture of pain and anger, that left her uneasy. "The truth, Olivia, is that my mother didn't simply die. She was the first volunteer of Project Aurora." The words hit Olivia like an electric shock. "What? But your father said they hadn't tested on humans yet." "And you believed him?" Hannah retorted, her voice laden with emotion. "My father has always been obsessed with his projects, but after he discovered the tumor, he became desperate. He convinced my mother to be the first to test the machine." Olivia felt the world spin around her. The implications of what Hannah was saying were devastating. "What happened?" she asked, almost fearing the answer. Hannah closed her eyes for a moment, as if reliving the memory was too painful. "The experiment went wrong. Terribly wrong. When they activated the machine, there was an explosion of energy. When we managed to open the capsule, my mother had aged decades in seconds. She died in my arms, Olivia." Tears were streaming down Hannah's face, and Olivia felt her own eyes fill with water. The story was too horrible to be true, but Hannah's evident suffering left no doubt. "Why would your father continue with the project after that?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Guilt, remorse, obsession," Hannah replied, wiping away her tears. "He swore he would make the machine work, that he would find a way to go back and save my mother. But with each attempt, each failure, he only sinks deeper into this madness." Olivia felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Everything she had believed in over the past few weeks, all the enthusiasm for the project, was now tainted by this terrible revelation. "Why are you telling me this now?" Olivia asked, trying to maintain her composure. Hannah stared at her intensely. "Because you're different, Olivia. You have a good heart, but you also have a sharp mind. I need you to understand the real risks of what we're doing here. It's not just science or progress. We're playing with forces we don't fully understand. Olivia thought of Albert, how he seemed to genuinely believe in the project's potential for good. But now, knowing what she knew, how could she continue? What do you want me to do? Olivia asked, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. I want you to open your eyes, Hannah replied. Observe, question. And if the time comes when you realize this needs to stop, I need to know if I can count on you. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with implications. Olivia knew she was at a crossroads. Continuing with the project meant risking more lives, perhaps even her own. But abandoning it could mean losing the chance to do something truly revolutionary, something that could change the world for the better. I need to think, Olivia finally said. This is a lot to process at once. Hannah nodded, understanding. I understand. Just remember, Olivia, time is precious, and in this case, more than ever, it's not on our side. As Hannah walked away, leaving Olivia alone with her thoughts, the young executive looked at the Aurora capsule. What before had seemed like a technological marvel now resembled a sleeping monster, ready to devour more lives. Olivia knew that the decisions she would make in the coming days would affect not only her future, but potentially the future of all humanity. And for the first time since she had entered Project Aurora, she wondered if she had enough strength to carry this burden. As the silent laboratory enveloped her, Olivia realized that she was at the epicenter of a storm she was only beginning to understand. The past, present, and future converged at that moment, and she was the only one who could decide which direction they would take. The days following Hannah's revelation were a whirlwind for Olivia. Every moment in the laboratory, every conversation with Albert, was now imbued with new meaning, laden with a weight she could barely bear. Olivia found herself torn between loyalty to Albert, who had given her a unique opportunity, and horror at what Hannah had revealed. She observed every detail of the project with new eyes, looking for clues, signs that something else might be wrong. On a particularly tense afternoon, Albert called her for a private meeting. His expression was more tired than usual, the deep circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. Olivia, he began, his voice low, I think it's time for us to take the next step in the project. Her heart raced. What step would that be? Albert hesitated for a moment, as if measuring his next words. I want you to lead our first attempt at temporal travel with a human being. The shock was immediate. Olivia felt her blood freeze in her veins. Me? But why? Because I trust you, Albert replied, his eyes shining with a mixture of hope and desperation. You have the technical knowledge and moral integrity to lead this. Olivia struggled to maintain her composure. Hannah's words echoed in her. Silence good, Albert, are you sure we're ready? The risks are immense, I know, he interrupted her. But time is running out, Olivia. My tumor. It's growing faster than we expected. The revelation hit her like a blow. Despite everything she now knew, Olivia couldn't deny the compassion she felt for Albert. How long? She asked softly. Months, maybe weeks, he replied, his voice breaking. That's why we need to act now. If we can make this work, we could not only save my life, but revolutionize medicine, prevent catastrophes, change the course of history for the better. Olivia found herself facing an agonizing dilemma. On one hand, Albert's words were tempting, the promise of a better future, the chance to save lives. On the other, Hannah's somber warning and the risk of repeating the tragedy of the past. Who would be the volunteer? She asked, fearing the answer. Albert smiled sadly. Myself, of course. The shock of the declaration almost made Olivia stagger. No, it's too dangerous. It's my only chance, Olivia, he argued, and if something goes wrong, at least I won't be risking anyone else's life. Olivia felt tears forming in her eyes. The nobility of Albert's gesture contrasted painfully with the danger of the situation. I need time, she finally said, to review all the protocols, to ensure everything is perfect. Albert nodded, understanding. Of course, but we don't have much time, remember that. When she left Albert's office, Olivia felt as if she were carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She walked to the Aurora capsule, observing her distorted reflection on the metallic surface. That's when she noticed something strange, a small detail in the capsule's structure that didn't match the designs she had studied. Intrigued, Olivia moved closer to examine it better. What she discovered in the following hours left her breathless. There were discrepancies in the calculations, subtle alterations in the safety protocols. Someone had modified the original design, and the changes seemed to have been made recently. With her heart racing, Olivia realized she was at an even bigger crossroads than she had imagined. The modifications could be the key to making the machine work correctly, or they could be a deliberate sabotage. As night fell over New York City, Olivia knew she had a crucial decision to make: confront Albert, alert Hannah, or investigate further on her own. The clock on the wall seemed to mock her, each tick-tock reminding her that time, the very essence of what they were trying to control, was rapidly running out. And Olivia, at the center of this web of secrets and temporal paradoxes, knew that her next actions could change not only the future, but potentially rewrite the very fabric of reality. Olivia spent the next few nights immersed in a frantic investigation. She slept little, lived on coffee, and worked tirelessly to unravel the mystery behind the modifications to the Aurora capsule. Every line of code, every equation, every detail of the project was meticulously analyzed. It was on the third night that she finally found something that made her heart freeze. The modifications weren't an attempt to improve the project, nor were they sabotage. They were a complete recalibration of the system, altering the very concept of how the machine worked. And most shocking, the alterations bore Hannah's digital signature. Olivia sat down, stunned by the discovery. Why would Hannah do this? Why secretly alter the project and then warn her about the dangers? Nothing made sense. Determined to get answers, Olivia called an urgent meeting with Albert and Hannah. The atmosphere in the conference room was tense, the heavy silence interrupted only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. "I've discovered something," Olivia began, her voice firm despite her nervousness. "Someone has made significant alterations to the Aurora capsule project." Albert frowned. "What kind of alterations?" "A complete recalibration of the temporal coordinate system," Olivia explained, projecting the diagrams on the screen. "And the digital signature on the modifications. It's yours, Hannah." Hannah's face went pale, while Albert stood up abruptly, shock evident in his expression. "Hannah, what have you done?" he asked, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. Hannah took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. I discovered something, Dad, something about Mom's death." The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia felt as if she were watching a scene in slow motion, unable to intervene. "What are you talking about?" Albert asked, his voice now a hoarse whisper. "The machine, it worked that day," Hannah revealed, her words coming out broken. "Mom traveled in time. She saw something so terrible that she preferred to sacrifice herself rather than let it happen." Olivia watched the scene, feeling like an intruder in an intensely personal family drama. Albert staggered, leaning on the table as if his legs could no longer support him. How do you know this?" he asked. Hannah took a small device from her pocket. "She left this for me, a recording. I only managed to decode it recently." With trembling hands, Hannah activated the device. A woman's voice, broken by static, filled the room. "Hannah, my darling, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't come back. What I saw, the future, is horrible. The time machine in the wrong hands led to the destruction of everything. Wars, chaos, the end of civilization as we know it. I can't allow this to happen. Forgive me, but I must ensure that the machine never works correctly. It's the only way." The recording ended, leaving a heavy silence in the room. Albert seemed to have aged years in a few minutes, his face a mask of pain and confusion. "That's why you altered the project," Olivia concluded, looking at Hannah. "To ensure the machine wouldn't work as it should." Hannah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I couldn't tell the whole truth. I knew Dad would never give up if he knew it had worked once." Albert slowly stood up, his face a mixture of conflicting emotions. "All these years, all the work—" "Dad," Hannah pleaded, "we have to stop. Mum sacrificed herself to protect us, to protect the world. We can't ignore her warning." Olivia watched the scene, her mind working furiously. Hannah's mother's warning was terrifying, but what if there was a way to use the machine responsibly? What if they could find a middle ground? "Wait," Olivia intervened, her voice surprisingly firm. "What if there's a third option? A way to use the machine for good, but with safeguards to prevent the future Hannah's mother saw?" Both father and daughter turned to Olivia, their expressions a mixture of surprise and curiosity. "What do you have in mind?" Albert asked, a spark of hope in his tired eyes. Olivia took a deep breath, knowing that what she would say next could change the course of their lives and, potentially, the fate of humanity. "I think I have an idea," she began, "but it will require us to work together, to trust each other completely, and, most importantly, to be willing to accept that there may be things we shouldn't change, no matter how painful that may be." As Olivia began to outline her plan, she knew they were about to embark on an even more dangerous and unpredictable journey than any time travel, a journey that would test not only her intelligence and skills, but also her ethics, her courage, and her humanity. The future and the past awaited their decisions with bated breath. In the weeks following the shocking revelation, the tension in the Project Aurora laboratory was palpable. Olivia, Albert, and Hannah worked tirelessly, joining forces to implement the bold plan Olivia had proposed. The idea was ambitious, to create a temporal anchoring system that would allow time travel, but with rigid limits and ethical safeguards, built into the very mechanism of the machine. It was a delicate dance between advanced science and moral philosophy. "The concept is simple," Olivia explained during one of their long night meetings. "Each trip will have a temporal umbilical cord, preventing drastic changes to the timeline. Additionally, we'll implement an AI-based ethical protocol that will evaluate the possible consequences of each action in the past." Albert, despite his declining health, showed a new vigor. "It's brilliant, Olivia. It combines the original vision of the project with the ethical concerns Hannah brought to light." Hannah, for her part, still seemed hesitant. "What if it's not enough? What if we still cause the future my mother saw?" Olivia placed a comforting hand on Hannah's shoulder. "That's why we're going to test exhaustively. We won't take a step without being absolutely certain it's safe." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The laboratory became a second home for the trio, who worked tirelessly to perfect the new design of the Aurora capsule. It was during this intense period that Olivia noticed a subtle change in her relationship with Hannah. What began as a cautious, professional partnership evolved into a close friendship, and gradually into something more. Glances that lasted a second too long, casual touches that sent shivers down her spine, late-night conversations that went far beyond work. One night, while reviewing complex calculations, Hannah broke the silence. "Olivia, have you ever wondered, if we had the chance to change one thing in our lives, what would it be?" Olivia paused, reflecting. "Honestly, I don't think I'd change anything. Every choice, every mistake brought us here. And here, well, it's not such a bad place to be." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to disappear around them. Hannah leaned in slowly, her lips inches from Olivia's. The moment was interrupted by the shrill sound of an alarm. Red lights were flashing throughout the laboratory. "What's happening?" shouted Hannah, running to the control panel. Olivia followed her, her heart racing. The monitors showed chaotic readings, as if reality itself was contorting. "It's impossible," Albert murmured, having just entered the laboratory running. "The machine. It activated by itself." The Aurora capsule was humming with energy, never seen before. Arcs of bluish electricity danced around it, and in the center a bright light was beginning to form. "We need to shut it down," Hannah shouted, running to the emergency controls. But before they could do anything, the light at the center of the capsule exploded in a blinding flash. When they finally managed to open their eyes, they were paralyzed by the scene before them. A figure had emerged from the light. As the brightness diminished, The contours became clearer. It was a woman, her grey hair flowing as if she were suspended in the air. Her face, though aged, was unmistakable. "Mom?" Hannah whispered, her voice trembling. The woman smiled sadly, her eyes scanning the room until they fixed on Albert. "My love, how long it's been—" Albert staggered, leaning on Olivia to avoid falling. "Margaret? But how?" Margaret, Hannah's mother and Albert's wife, took a step forward, her form still flickering as if she weren't fully there. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "I've come from the future, a future we managed to fix, but at a terrible cost." Olivia felt the weight of the moment. Everything they had worked for, all the theories and precautions, were being challenged by the impossible presence of this woman. "What happened?" Olivia asked, trying to maintain her composure. Margaret looked directly at her eyes laden with knowledge and pain. "You succeeded. The machine worked, but the consequences— oh, the consequences were beyond anything we could have imagined." As Margaret began to tell her story, an account of a future they had simultaneously created and destroyed, Olivia realized they were on the verge of a revelation that would change not only their lives, but potentially the fate of all humanity. Project. Aurora had opened a door, and now they would have to deal with what was on the other side, ready or not. The laboratory was plunged into a tense silence as Margaret, the impossible visitor from the future, began her narrative. Her form continued to float slightly, as if she were between two realities. "In the future I come from," Margaret began, her voice echoing ethereally, "we managed to perfect time travel. Initially, it was celebrated as humanity's greatest advancement. We cured diseases before they manifested, prevented natural disasters, saved countless lives." She paused, her eyes filling with sadness. "But we didn't realize that each change, no matter how small, created ripples in the fabric of time. Alternative realities began to form, some wonderful, others terrible. The multiverse that was just theory became a chaotic reality." Olivia, Hannah, and Albert listened attentively, their faces a mixture of fascination and horror. "Governments and corporations began to fight for control of the technology," Margaret continued. "Wars were waged not just in the present, but across time. The very existence of humanity was at risk." "But you said we fixed this," Hannah interrupted, her voice trembling. "How?" Margaret smiled sadly at her daughter. "With sacrifice, my love. A group of scientists, including you three, developed a desperate plan. We created a device called the temporal seal, capable of permanently closing all the rifts in time we had created." "But that would mean—" Albert began, his voice failing. "Yes," Margaret confirmed, "it would mean eliminating the possibility of time travel, forever. And more than that, erasing all the changes we had made." Olivia felt a knot form in her throat. "Including saving lives, preventing disasters?" Margaret nodded gravely. "The price of the universe's stability was high. Millions we had saved would return to their original fates, including you, Albert." The silence that followed was deafening. Albert, pale, leaned on a nearby table. "Then, why are you here?" Olivia asked, her analytical mind struggling to process everything. "If the temporal seal eliminated time travel, how can you be here now?" Margaret turned to Olivia, a gleam of admiration in her eyes. "Always perceptive, Olivia. I'm here because you in the future found a loophole, one last chance to send a message, to try a different path." She approached the Aurora capsule, her fingers almost touching the metallic surface. "This machine, in its current form, must never be activated. But the knowledge you've acquired, the understanding of time and space, can be used in another way." "How?" Hannah asked, stepping forward. "You must create the temporal seal now, before time travel becomes a reality," Margaret explained. "Not to close existing rifts, but to prevent them from opening in the first place, a protective shield around our reality." Olivia felt her mind spin with the implications. "But that would mean giving up everything we've worked for, all the lives we could save, all the knowledge we could gain. Sometimes, Margaret said softly, the greatest act of heroism is knowing when to stop. You have the chance to protect not just our world, but all possible worlds from unimaginable chaos. Albert, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. And what about my tumor? Margaret's gaze softened as she met her husband's eyes. My love, your journey may be shorter in this reality, but the impact you'll have by making the right choice will echo through time in ways you can barely imagine. Silent tears streamed down Hannah's face. How much time do we have to decide? Margaret began to float toward the Aurora capsule, her form becoming increasingly translucent. The decision was already made the moment I decided to come here. The future I come from no longer exists. What you do from now on will write a new story. As Margaret disappeared in a flash of light, leaving the trio stunned and emotionally exhausted, Olivia knew they were facing the most important decision of their lives. The weight of knowledge of the future, the responsibility to protect reality, and the personal sacrifice that would be required of each of them weighed on their shoulders. Project Aurora, which had begun with the promise of conquering time, now faced its greatest challenge, knowing when to stop, when to let time follow its natural course. As the laboratory returned to silence, interrupted only by the soft hum of equipment, Olivia, Hannah, and Albert looked at each other, knowing that the real work was just beginning. The creation of the temporal seal would not only be a scientific challenge, but an ethical and emotional journey that would test the limits of their knowledge, their courage, and above all, their humanity. The days following Margaret's visit were a whirlwind of emotions and frantic activity. Olivia, Hannah, and Albert dove headfirst into developing the temporal seal, working tirelessly to transform a concept from the future into a tangible reality. The laboratory, once a temple dedicated to the conquest of time, had now become the cradle of its protection. Complex equations covered whiteboards, simulations ran day and night on supercomputers, and miniature prototypes of the seal occupied every available surface. For Olivia, each day brought new challenges that were not only scientific but also ethical and emotional. She saw the determination in Albert's tired eyes, who fought against the advance of his disease with impressive willpower. She observed Hannah, torn between love for her father and the weight of knowledge about a future that would never come to exist. One night, while working late, Hannah broke the silence. Olivia, have you ever wondered if we're doing the right thing? What if the future my mother saw was just one of infinite possibilities? Olivia stopped what she was doing, carefully considering the question. Honestly, I think about it all the time. But then I remember the look in her eyes, the weight of her words. I think we have to trust that she showed us the safest path. Hannah nodded slowly, her eyes meeting Olivia's. It's funny, you know. I spent so much time trying to stop my father's project, and now here I am, helping to create something even more powerful. Life has these ironies, Olivia smiled softly, placing a hand over Hannah's. The touch sent an electric current between them, a tension that had been growing for weeks. Before either could say anything else, an alarm sounded. They ran to the main laboratory where they found Albert collapsed on the floor, pale and breathless. "Dad!" Hannah shouted, running to his side. Olivia quickly called an ambulance while helping Hannah to position Albert more comfortably. The minutes that followed were agonizing, filled with the sound of Albert's labored breathing and the distant echo of approaching sirens. At the hospital, the news wasn't good. The tumor had grown faster than predicted. The doctors gave Albert weeks, perhaps days. Back at the laboratory, a somber atmosphere hung in the air. Time, which they had tried so hard to master, now mocked them, slipping through their fingers like fine sand. "We need to finish the seal," Albert declared, his voice weak but determined as soon as he was discharged from the hospital. "It's the only way to give meaning to all of this." Olivia and Hannah exchanged worried glances, but they knew he was right. In the days that followed, they worked with renewed intensity. Albert, even confined to a wheelchair, continued to be the brilliant scientist he always was, his sharp mind defying the limits of his weakened body. It was during one of these intense work sessions that Olivia made a shocking discovery. Analyzing the equations of the temporal seal, she realized something they had overlooked. "My God," she whispered, drawing the attention of the others. "The seal. It won't just prevent time travel. It will erase any trace that it was ever possible." "What do you mean?" Hannah asked, approaching to see the calculations. Olivia swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her next words. "When we activate the seal, it won't just protect the fabric of space-time. It will alter our memories, our reality. We'll forget everything about Project Aurora, about Margaret's journey from the future. It will be as if none of this ever happened." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with implications. Albert was the first to break it, his voice surprisingly firm. Perhaps it's better that way," he said. "A new beginning, free from the weight of this knowledge." Hannah looked at her father, tears in her eyes. But we'll forget everything, even these last moments together." Albert smiled sadly. "My dear, the love we share, the lessons we've learned, they'll stay with us even if we don't remember where they came from." Olivia felt her heart tighten. She looked at Hannah, thinking of all the unspoken moments, of the feelings that had grown between them. "Perhaps," she said softly, "we should use the time we have left to create memories that are worth it, even if we can't consciously keep them." The three looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. Before them lay not only the final challenge of their scientific project, but also the task of closing this chapter of their lives in the most meaningful way possible. As the sun set over New York City, bathing the laboratory in golden tones, Olivia, Hannah, and Albert prepared for the final days of their journey together. The temporal seal was almost complete, but before activating it they had one last mission: to live, love, and say goodbye, knowing that each moment was precious and unrepeatable. The countdown to the end of one era and the beginning of another had begun, and with it, the promise of an unknown but protected tomorrow. The day of the temporal seal's activation dawned with a surreal calmness. New York City, normally a chaotic symphony of horns and voices, seemed strangely silent, as if the city itself were holding its breath in anticipation. In the laboratory, Olivia, Hannah, and Albert made the final preparations. The atmosphere was dense, loaded with unspoken emotions and tense expectations. The temporal seal, the result of weeks of intense work, rested in the center of the room, a silver sphere the size of a basketball, pulsing with a bluish energy. Albert, now confined to a wheelchair, supervised the final adjustments with a determined gleam in his eyes. Despite the fragility of his body, his mind remained as sharp as ever. "Everything is ready," Olivia announced, her voice trembling slightly. "We just need to activate the initialization mechanism." Hannah approached, her eyes scanning the laboratory. That had been her home for the past few months. "So this is it," she murmured. "Everything we've worked for, everything we've lived through, will simply disappear." Albert extended his hand, holding his daughter's. "It won't disappear, my love. It will transform into something new, something that will protect not just our world, but all possible worlds." Olivia observed the scene, feeling a lump in her throat. In the last few days, they had dedicated themselves not only to finalizing the project, but to creating precious memories. Long dinners accompanied by wine and stories, walks through Central Park, nights of stargazing on the building's terrace, each moment laden with the bittersweet weight of the imminent farewell. "Before we activate it," Olivia said, her voice gaining strength, "I think we should say what's in our hearts. One last time." Albert nodded, a gentle smile on his tired face. "Olivia, when you stopped to help me on that sidewalk, you didn't just save my life. You gave us the chance to do something truly extraordinary. Your intelligence, your compassion, your integrity, they were the heart of this project." Hannah, with tears in her eyes, was next. "Dad, I'm sorry for all the times I doubted, that I tried to stop you. Now I understand that your pursuit was always motivated by love, love for science, for humanity, and for us." She turned to Olivia, her voice trembling. "And Olivia, you entered our lives like a storm, turning everything upside down. I never imagined I would find not only a brilliant work partner, but someone who would make me feel things I never thought possible." Olivia felt her heart race. It was now or never. "Hannah, Albert, you became my family. Albert, you gave me a chance when I was at rock bottom, trusted me beyond reason, and Hannah," she paused, gathering courage. "Hannah, I fell in love with you. Each day by your side was an adventure, a challenge, a joy." The silence that followed was broken by the soft sound of Hannah moving. Before Olivia could react, she felt Hannah's lips on hers, a deep and desperate kiss, laden with promises that could never be fulfilled. When they separated, Albert was smiling, tears streaming down his wrinkled face. "It's time," he said softly. With one last look at each other, the three positioned themselves around the temporal seal. Olivia initiated the activation sequence, her fingers dancing over the keyboard with methodical precision. The sphere began to pulse more intensely, the bluish energy expanding in concentric waves. A bright light filled the laboratory, enveloping them. "Remember," Albert's voice sounded almost ethereal, "love remains, even when memories fade." The last thing Olivia saw before the light became blinding was Hannah's smile, a mixture of love, gratitude, and hope. And then the world changed. Olivia blinked, confused. She was standing on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, her work folder firmly in her hands. For a moment she felt a strange sense of déjà vu, as if she had forgotten something important. Shaking her head to brush off the sensation, she looked at her watch, 8:45. She had exactly 15 minutes to reach the office before the important meeting with the Japanese investors. As she ran down the busy avenue, Olivia didn't notice the man in a suit passing by her, looking perfectly healthy. She didn't notice the momentary look of recognition in his eyes, nor the elegant woman accompanying him, whose eyes lingered on her for a second too long. The world continued turning, protected by an invisible shield against the storms of time. And although they didn't remember somewhere deep in their hearts, Olivia, Hannah, and Albert carried the echo of an extraordinary journey, of a love that transcended time itself. Olivia arrived at the office on time, ready for another day of work. And as she prepared for the meeting, she felt an inexplicable sense of peace and purpose. The future, with all its unknown possibilities, awaited. Dear listeners, we hope that the journey of Olivia, Hannah, and Albert has touched your hearts. To continue exploring fascinating worlds and moving stories, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating narratives. Find it by clicking on the link to the left. If this story engaged you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day we bring new stories that explore the complexities of life, love, and the choices we make. What would you do if you had the power to change the past? What sacrifices would you be willing to make for the greater good? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might be the inspiration for our next great story. Remember, as Olivia, Hannah, and Albert discovered, sometimes the greatest act of courage is accepting the present and embracing the unknown future. Until the next adventure.